All right, finna go ahead and get started. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of a Champ podcast. For today's episode 163, we're going to be discussing ignorance is bliss. Now, this is going to be a topic that it should get you thinking. And if there's a situation that you view where this topic is prevalent, I want you to go ahead and leave it in the comments. Maybe certain situations you've seen within life where maybe it was better off to be ignorant, ignorant, yeah, or maybe it was better off to be all knowing, right? I want you to go to let me know for sure, for sure. A few things I want to say before I go to get started. Make sure you go ahead and follow me on TikTok, Rumble, and Twitch. All Life of a Champ podcasts on everything. As well as make sure you go ahead and leave a like on my YouTube shorts as well as my YouTube clips. If you do enjoy today's video, make sure you go ahead and leave it a like. Is there anything else I want to say before I go to get started? Nah, no, I think I've said everything. All right, we're gonna get into it. This topic is gonna be a topic that's, like I said, a lot of people should relate to. There's gonna be a lot of points that I will be making today that you will feel for sure. So, um, like I said, leave in the comments if you have any comments or questions regarding anything that I'm mentioning on today's podcast. So, first things first, I want to clarify with this. So, like I said, today's topic, ignorance is bliss. So, first, I must define for the people that do not know what is ignorance. Ignorance essentially is the lack of knowledge or information. Essentially, that's what it is. And the catchy saying that you probably hear from time and time again in life, which what I heard, of course. Obviously, ignorance is bliss. Basically, you don't know, so you don't need to worry. Essentially, that's pretty much what it means. Essentially, and obviously, like I said, dude, just by me saying that, you can already think of like maybe a few different situations where this could particularly apply to. Where, like I said, you don't know, so you don't worry. So, for example, let's just say, I'll give you one quick example. Right, children are very ignorant to just life in general because they're naive. They don't understand the evils that the life and that the world has for them, right? So they live within ignorance, and ignorance is obviously bliss. They live in a very blissful state because they're not knowing. They don't have that knowledge of how evil the world truly is, right? They only see it through their own experience. They haven't exactly seen it from the perspective of others yet, right? Obviously, I'm going very deep into it, but essentially, you understand what I'm trying to say, hopefully. And yeah, so that's going to be the example we're going to go ahead and use. Like I said, there's going to be many different examples that I can use and I will use within this podcast. But if there's any specific examples that you can think of within your own mind, make sure to go to leave in the comments. So getting into it. So obviously, you guys know what ignorance means now, and you know what the saying "ignorance is bliss" obviously means. Getting into it. So like I said, so ignorance is bliss. So what is the opposite of ignorance? In my opinion, the opposite of ignorance is going to be all knowing, the knowledge, the information. Um, that's going to be the inverse of ignorance. So so we got ignorance is bliss, knowledge is painful. That is the way that I personally see it. Right, knowledge is necessary. Is going to be a necessary evil because it also is going to be very very painful. But there's gonna be many ways you can think about that topic of a knowledge is painful because, like I said, there's certain situations where you could probably point out saying, you know what, knowing a little bit more goes a long way, and even though it might hurt, um, it's better to hurt than to not know at all, right? At the end of the day. So, like I said, knowledge is painful, and then give me 1 second. And what's even more painful than that is going through a situation within life where you've already kind of learned what you needed to learn, right? Or you kind of already acquired the knowledge. You went through the experience. You went into the experience being ignorant. You came out of the experience filled with knowledge, right? You put yourself back in a situation where you'll go through that same type of event, but if you don't act as if you have the knowledge, then it's still going to be painful. And I would even say for it to be more painful than it would be to have never experienced it at all, right? So that's the way that I personally see it. So like I said, there's certain people, and like I said, I can speak from my own personal self because I've seen me do this. I've seen other people do this. Well, they'll know better. They'll just know better to not do something, but they do it knowing that's going to come with the consequences, but they still do it. And I find that very very interesting, at least particularly with human behavior, right? that you're not 100%, and humans are not, they're not meant to be 100% um learn from their mistakes. That's just what it is. That's just what I've accepted. Um but like I said, when you repeat that pattern of behavior, like I said, it becomes an entirely different problem. It becomes something that transcends ignorance and knowledge itself. It's something that is, it's self-defiant. That's the way that I personally describe it. But yes, I would say it is worse. It is worse to go through something knowing what it does, as opposed to, having the knowledge or acquiring the knowledge, which is painful, or, not knowing at all, which is, like I said, painful as well, but different types of pain. So basically, what it comes down to is this: with all that you will learn within this life, all that you will apply within this life, there's always going to be a counterbalance that's going to be painful in some type of capacity. At least this is what I've observed. And of course, it's obviously going to be very, very situational, right? But essentially, once you learn something or you outlearn something, which are two different things, by the way, because you can learn something and then you can like almost over understand it to the point where you outlearn something, and then you waste time repeating the patterns of previous learning, right? And like I said, I've seen myself do this, unfortunately. I've seen other people do this, unfortunately. But like I said, they will know better, but act as if they don't know. And like I said, much more painful than having the knowledge or acquiring the knowledge, and it's much more painful than not knowing the knowledge at all. Yes, and here's one thing I want to say with this as well is it should be very, very hard and very, very painful to go back down a path that you've already been down, that you already know how it ends, but you refuse to go ahead and make the change you need to go ahead and make. So I'm gonna give you an example that I see. This is gonna be the time old example. Like I said, there's gonna be plenty of examples that I will use today, but this is gonna be the age old example, right? So for the people that smoke, right? So let's just say they smoke cigarettes or something like that, right? They know damn well that's not the best decision that they've ever made in their entire life, right? They know that very, very well. Some know that it could expedite your death. Obviously, it can cause cancers and all that type of other stuff, right? But with all that knowledge, with all that acquired knowledge, because it is no longer ignorance, right? Ignorance is not knowing. Knowing is having been through it or have seen somebody been through it, right? Going through it, right? But to repeat the same pattern of behavior, knowing the consequences of your actions, knowing the internal conflict that it will cause, but still doing it, like I said, is a very, very interesting thing. It is one of those things that will be very, very hard to do. Because if you look at it like this, right? So if we take that specific example, right? A person who's been smoking, let's just say they've been smoking for years, right? Whatever. Cool. They've been smoking for years. They have two options. They can listen to everybody else around them, which is basically telling them, hopefully, stop smoking. Or you have the decision to go ahead and continue to smoke. Obviously, you know that there's going to be certain outcomes, and regardless, is it going to be particularly ideal to that person in that given moment who has that certain habit? No, it's not. So if you think about it this way, right? For them to quit, for them to quit smoking, right? Very, very painful process. Initially, because you're addicted to it, obviously, initially the most painful thing that you can possibly experience in that current moment. Probably. So that's uncomfortable. That is not gonna push you, or most people, it's not gonna push people to go ahead and pursue that because quite frankly it's painful. Obviously. Stopping, having the withdrawal symptoms, things like that. Then you basically turn into a whole different person essentially, which is interesting. And then you have the inverse of that, which is going ahead and not stopping. So you know what you're doing is wrong. You're fully conscious and you're fully aware of what you're doing, and you're almost prepared to deal with the inevitable consequences that will come, right? So it's just one of those things, and I find that very, very interesting because I see this pattern of behavior not only within myself, like I had mentioned time and time again, but within other people. And I do believe that there's got to be a point in time where you transcend this, you transcend these ways of being. And of course, I'm not going to say you're going to be able to transcend all ways of being when it comes to this, but you must eventually strive, hopefully strive, to be in a better position than where you started, right? Because if not, you're going to be in the same perpetual cycle That literally won't end because you will not choose for it to end. And I think that's very, very interesting. Like I said, if there's anything that I mentioned, if I'm talking complete bullshit, let me know in the comments. If there's something that I've said that made you think, I also want you to leave in the comments as well. Or if you have a question, let me know. But like I had mentioned, I want to reiterate this, right? In those certain moments, and like I said, hopefully I'm speaking on this, and hopefully something comes to mind within your own personal life. You watching this right now, within your own personal life, where you can say, that is my version of smoking. That is my version of not knowing, right? That is my version. So the things in the examples that I talk about, you can apply them to your own personal life. There's going to be certain things that you do that you know you shouldn't do, but you still continue to do it. You still are prepared to take the consequences that will inevitably come with the actions that you went ahead and chose to do, right? I'm gonna hopefully break it down for you so you can understand it. And like I said, me saying that, you're probably gonna automatically think of something that you have done or you've seen somebody do automatically, right? And like I had mentioned, if you choose to go ahead and continue with this, just know it should be very, very hard and it should be very, very painful because you know better. That's what it is. You know better. But once you become an adult, you become your own parent. That's what people don't know. When it comes to being an adult, when it comes to finally being the age of where you're an adult, you have to be able to self-govern yourself correctly. And if you can't, which you observe, and like I said, I've observed this time and time again, most people aren't. They're not very good parents to themselves. That's just what it is. Would you say that's being careless? Yes, I would say it is going to be a form of being careless. It's going to be a form of being in denial. It's going to be in the form of being almost back to being ignorant again. Honestly, in a weird way, you kind of go back to being ignorant again because you're literally trying to fool yourself. You're trying to fool yourself with something that's that's obviously true, right? Yes. And one thing I want to mention with this as well, like I said, regardless of what you're doing that is going to fulfill what I'm talking about on today's episode, which like I said, if you're watching it this far, you know what? I appreciate for watching because most people they're not able to have an uncomfortable conversation with themselves, right? That's just what it is. But one thing I want to reiterate to you because this is something that I find also very, very profound when it comes to you rejecting the things that you know you need to go ahead and do. What you must realize is this: you're delaying your perceived success, where you potentially could go, the progress that you could make, the strides that will be made eventually. You're delaying that. You're pushing it off. You're saying, you know what? Not today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not next year. Whenever I get to it. That's what you're saying. When you choose to have when you're no longer ignorant, when you have the knowledge, but you still repeat the same course of action where you already have that acquired knowledge, you're delaying your success. You're delaying your progress in life, right? And with that being said, one thing I want to mention with that as well is you're also not only are you pushing it back, but you're also shrinking your ceiling. You're shrinking your own potential just by you doing, or rather, not doing what you know you need to do, or to stop doing the things you need to stop doing, right? So there's going to be consequences to your actions is what I pretty much want to say with this episode. There's going to be inevitable consequences with your actions. Now, like I had mentioned before, are you a good enough parent to yourself where you're going to need to go ahead and make the adjustments that you're going to need to make, that you know you need to make, that life is telling you that you need to go ahead and make? Or like I said, are you going to get back to that weird state where you know better but you're choosing not to? Wouldn't you say that's childish? It's childish because you know better, right? If this was a kid, if we were talking about a kid, you would say, you know better than that. You know what's right, you know what's wrong. So why are you not acting like you know what's right and what's wrong? But if you recognize this, and like I said, you could be the observer for your own self, right? Observe some people within your life. I mean, like I said, me even saying this is probably going to bring up examples, but I want you to look to see if anybody in your life has contradicting ways of being. And I would say most people, unfortunately, do have contradicting ways of being. where they know what they're doing. Clearly, they clearly know what they're doing, but they're not doing. They're doing what they know they shouldn't be doing. That's just what it is. Like I said, adults, they don't know how to parent themselves, of course. So with that being said, this is how it personally applies to my life, right? Like I said, there's certain ways, there's certain things that I do that I know I probably shouldn't do. So with that being said, of course, maybe I'm not being a good parent to myself, just as you are probably not being a good parent to yourself, or your friend is not being a good parent to his self, or your mom is not being a good parent to herself, right? Things like that, right? But what I have, and this is where it comes in, which I find very very interesting, is I could use this. Oh, I'm young excuse, right? And it becomes tricky because I can, hopefully, or you would think, I could just say, you know what, I'm young, I can make the problem. I can make it, and it's just gonna be what it is, right? But the tricky part about it is this: is if I know better, then can I even really use that excuse? Because I still have a lot of time, but I already know what I want. I know what to avoid. I know the things I want to go ahead and pursue within this life. So if I choose to not do the things I know I need to do, or rather stop doing the things that I know I need to stop, I'm still not being a good parent. You see that, right? And like I said, we let people get away with certain things for being a certain age, and I find that very very interesting because what it comes down to really is it doesn't matter about the age; it matters about the maturity. Do you actually know what you're doing is wrong or not? Do you know right from wrong? And if you know right from wrong, why are you acting as if you don't? Like I said, it's just one of those things that I observe within human behavior that I find absolutely fascinating because it doesn't make any sense. It logically does not add up. It doesn't make any sense. But yet, it's very, very common. It's very, very common. One thing I want to say with this as well, and like I said, if you're watching this and you're taking this seriously into consideration for your own personal life, right? One thing that I've learned within the last 2 or 3 years that I've been a very, very conscious observer in within the people in my life, right? Is most people, they don't ever want to face their darkest demons. They just don't. They will do their best to avoid it at all costs possible. They want to live within ignorance, even though life is literally alerting them to go ahead and change. There's a lot of suggestibility that would suggest a different behavior out of them or a different change out of them. But like I'd mentioned, most people don't ever want to face their darkest demons. That's just what it is. They can't handle the internal conflict that will arise. But little do they know is you're gonna have internal conflict anyways. Whether you face your darkest demon or whether you put it in the closet for it to get bigger, right? It's still there. You can't avoid it. You cannot avoid it. But like I said, I find that very very funny, right? You're not being a good parent to yourself, right? Like I said, if I'm talking bullshit, let me know. Let me read some of these comments and then I'll get back to what I was saying. Knowing you're doing wrong but choosing to not change only causes unnecessary delay that you will eventually beat yourself up about. Exactly right. That can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They can only focus on what's inside of the tunnel. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right, Jane. You're exactly right. You can't see anything grander than your vision of what is right in front of you right now. That's just what it is, right? And like I said, then you have to then you have to analyze that for what it is. Are you being, like I said, I'm gonna ask this question, and I never even thought even to ask this question, but are you being a good parent to yourself? Because you need to be able to self-manage yourself properly, and if you cannot, then you're not as competent. That's just what it comes down to, right? And if you understand that and you observe the people in your life and you observe just people in general, you'll begin to realize that not only are they not good parents to themselves, but they're intentionally being defiant to themselves as well. They will inevitably have internal conflict within themselves because they're not able to face their darkest demons. Now, one thing about my upbringing, which has been very, very interesting, I would say, is I've embraced this every time. Every time. Every time I have internal conflict, every time I have a problem within myself, I've thought about it thoroughly, thoroughly. It's been taking up a lot of my mind. But like I said, now you have to ask yourself the question: it's going to take up your mind regardless. Are you going to face? You're going to fake. Are you going to face your darkest demon, or you're not? Like I said, you're gonna let it in the closet, let it grow in the closet. You have it away. You're not exactly focused on it right now, but it's still there, getting very, very, getting bigger, getting stronger, getting more resilient, getting in the way of your life, getting in the way of your mental processes because you understand that it's there and you're trying to act like it's not. So, like I said, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting human behavior to know better and to not do better. You try to live within ignorance, even though you're already all knowing. You understand it very, very thoroughly, but your actions suggest that you don't know any better. So, like I said, I'm gonna ask you the question. I'm gonna ask you the question that I think is a very profound question. Are you being a good parent to yourself? And if you aren't, then you need to change something, right? Regardless of how old you are, right? And like I said, I'm speaking to a younger crowd, but I understand that this can resonate with damn near anybody, right? Because we all do things we know we shouldn't do. We all continue to do things even though we've already transcended our knowledge based off of that topic, based off of that decision. We've mentally evolved past that, but we physically are in that same recurring problem. But like I said, and my question is, why isn't there more people that are facing their demons head on instead of just letting it grow in the closet and then having to no other choice but to deal with it in order to progress within this life? That's my question. Give me one second. All right, getting into it. And then here's what I think. Here's what I think personally. I think there's going to be an ideal mindset. There's going to be an ideal mindset that you can go ahead and have. That you should go ahead and approach life with, right? Like I said, maybe I'm talking bullshit, maybe I'm not. If I'm not talking bullshit, let me know. But your mindset should be this. You should be very, very careful and observant of yourself, first and foremost, of course. You should get to the point where you know all of your weaknesses, right? This is something that I've done time and time again, where I've sat with myself, observed myself very, very thoroughly. I've observed all my weaknesses because nobody knows all about all your weaknesses except you. You watching this right now, you know all of your weaknesses. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to yourself. You know all your weaknesses. You know all the things you could do to make your life better. I know this. I know this, and you know this damn well, right? My ideal is to face all of them and evolve past those. Or, like I said, deal with the consequences of acquired wisdom, but you still lack the action. There's only one of two routes you can possibly take. That is it. You have no other choice. With this podcast alone, like I said, it's kind of ironic because, like I said, it's called Ignorance is Bliss. Going into this podcast, you were ignorant to what I was about to say. Now you have no choice but to fully understand whether you are making the right decision for your life or not, whether you're doing the thing that you know you need to go ahead and do or not, whether you're choosing to live within ignorance or your understanding of the knowledge that has already been acquired and also implement it with action, right? So like I said, there's two options. You choose what you would like. You know what I'm going to go ahead and do, and you will see the results of that here soon as well. But like I said, you either face your problems head on, you learn about what you need to learn about, you apply it to your life, and you evolve past where you were, or you're in this cycle. You're in this constant cycle of dealing with the same problems because you're unwilling to face the demons that you know you need to go ahead and face. It's just one of two ways, man. It's one of two ways. Like I said, you observe everybody in your life. What route have they been taking their whole life? The people that you will look up to most will have fought off and defeated most of their internal demons as opposed to the people who haven't, right? The people who have the same type of lives, the people who live the same type of year over and over again, they do it for a reason. It's because they're unwilling to take care of the things that they know they need to take care of. That's what it comes down to. And I want to mention this as well because, like I said, I feel like this is also very, very prevalent. Most people live in ignorance when it comes to an old age. They're unwilling to change even though they know what they're doing is wrong. And like I said, the example, like I said, I'm going to use this example again. Like I said, the people with smoking. Um, they know it's not the best decision, but they would much rather deal with the consequences of their actions than to deal with the internal consequences that would inevitably be changing their behavior. They're living intentionally ignorant. Now, like I said, I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't know why. You let me know. But that's just what I observe, man. That's just what I observe. Why do you think older people are unwilling to change? I'm gonna assume you said unwilling to change. Because they forgot that they need to be their own parent. They've gotten to the point where they're so mature that they don't think that they need to self-govern themselves when they do. Which brings me to my next point. They've killed guilt. The guilt that they have within themselves, they've killed it. That was my next point. They no longer have the guilt for the thing that they know they need to do. It is not expressed as much as it once was before. When they first finally knew and first were, no longer ignorant of what they were doing, they had this knowledge, they had this healthy level of guilt, right? Now, the more you push that off, the less of it actually existing. It can only go two ways, really. This is the way that I personally see it. If you're a healthy individual, your guilt for not doing what you know you need to go ahead and do will grow. If you're a healthy minded individual, it will grow. Now, if you're an unhealthy minded individual, guilt will be killed. This feeling of guilt that you need to feel within this life will be killed. Now, that isn't a great thing at all because I believe, and I've said this time and time again on this podcast, guilt when it comes to you seeking your potential, it's an absolute necessity to have because if you do not have it, you don't have enough urgency to live with. And the death of guilt will be the death of your progress. That's what it comes down to. If you do not feel guilty for not doing the things that you need to go ahead and do, or doing the things that you need to stop doing, right? That's gonna determine your whole life's progress, right? Whether you actually evolve or whether you don't evolve. That's just what it comes down to. Yeah, and Jaden's exactly right. Guilt is your higher self speaking to you, right? And here's the thing: maybe you're a person that doesn't. Maybe you're a person that doesn't even hear guilt at all because you're living the way that you know you need to live. Or maybe you don't hear guilt because guilt has been killed and you killed it. But I do believe you can't fully kill guilt, in my opinion. You can't fully kill it, at least through my own personal paradigm. You can't fully kill guilt. But you can definitely shrink guilt. You can definitely shrink it. That's for sure. And just because you shrink it doesn't mean it's good. That's just what it is, man. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say for today's episode, man. That's gonna be today's episode. Yeah, but yeah, what I have to say with that is, yeah, just don't let that guilt be killed. The reason why people live knowing of the things that they know they need to stop doing, but still doing it is because that guilt has been shrunk or killed. So that is gonna be the answer, essentially, to this podcast. But I'm gonna reiterate the things that I've mentioned. Like I said, if you find it interesting, let me know. If you don't find it interesting, also let me know. So like I said, today's episode, Episode 163, talking about ignorance is bliss. Ignorance, like I had mentioned before, ignorance is the lack of knowledge or information. The saying ignorance is bliss is you don't know, so you don't need to worry, right? Not knowing is relief because you don't know what you could know, right? The inverse of that, the inverse of ignorance is knowledge or being all knowing, understanding and observing, right? The inverse of ignorance is bliss is knowledge is painful. Now there's a couple different types of pains with knowledge, right? There's pain regardless. Let's just say this. Let's just say this. There's pain when it comes to not knowing enough because obviously you don't know enough. But then there's also pain with having the knowledge because now you know too much. Or maybe you know the exact amount that you need and it's still painful. Because now you can't unlearn what you've already learned. You can't undo the damage that's already been done. And like I said, maybe that pain looks like the form of guilt, or looks like the form of shame, or looks like the form of, like Jaden had mentioned, your higher self speaking to you. Maybe that's what it looks like. But it's still pain regardless. It's still pain regardless. But would you rather have that pain, or would you rather have the pain of not knowing what you know you need to know in this life? Because there's only two ways. There's only two ways to go about it, man. There's really only two ways to go about it. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and reiterate a few more points from this podcast. Like I said, if you've enjoyed this podcast thoroughly, let me know in the comments. Like I said, if you didn't care for this podcast, let me know. Let me know. But yes, once you learn something or outlearn something, you have two options: continue with that same type of path where you have your knowledge already learned and acquired, or repeat the pattern again. Now, if you observe people very, very carefully within this life, observe the people that are maybe in your inner circle, right? They're going to have ways of being, if you observe and ask enough questions, where you're going to be able to recognize thoroughly that they're wasting their time repeating patterns of already learned knowledge. That's interesting. Why do they do that? Why do you do that? Think about that thoroughly, right? Like I said, at the very least, the pain that you're going to deal with this podcast is knowing too much. That's just what it comes down to. Now you can't deny what you've already learned. You just can't deny it anymore because quite frankly, you've already learned it. Or, like I said, you can live knowing too much and still choosing to act as if you don't know. But yeah, I want to mention that. I want to mention that because I find that very, very interesting. You're going to repeat the pattern of life. You're going to repeat the same lesson over and over and over again. When you're already going to know how the story plays out, you're already going to understand why you didn't progress within your life because you're unwilling to change that. Now, if you want to be successful, if you want to make progress within this life, it's going to look beyond what you have already learned right now. It's going to be beyond the decisions that you've already made for yourself right now. It's going to be beyond these things. You're not going to be able to get a different result having the same system in place, having the same knowledge in place. You can't get a different result with the same knowledge. That just doesn't work that way. Life just doesn't work that way. So, with that being said, when it comes to handling yourself through these certain types of issues or certain types of problems that you will have, it will be interesting to see if you decide to repeat that pattern of behavior or not. And like I said, if you talk to any older person who understands this concept that I'm speaking about very, very thoroughly, they will tell you themselves you will repeat the pattern you will repeat the pattern in a different way. Life will try to reteach you the lesson because life has thought that you haven't learned from the lesson because your actions don't suggest that you've actually learned from the problem that you had, from the knowledge you've acquired. So it will repeat until you show yourself that you've learned and you've acted as if you've learned, right? Like I had mentioned, regardless, If you do decide to go ahead and take the path that you already know you shouldn't take, which is the path of knowledge that you've already been down, this should be very, very hard, and this should be very, very painful, and this should be very, very guilt filled. And if not, then you're already not on the right path off the rip. If it's not painful, if it's not hard, if you don't feel guilt for going down a path that you've already learned about, and then like I said, you might be a lost cause off the rip. You might be a lost cause, and like I said, something that you need to very, very take a hard look on for sure. But what it ultimately comes down to is this, right? Do you want to shrink the ceiling of your potential, and do you want to delay the progress that you can make within your life? If the answer is yes, which obviously the answer is no, hopefully, then you need to take action where you need to take action. That's what it comes down to. If you don't, then you cannot complain about the progress that you haven't made because you were unwilling to make it in the times where it felt uncomfortable to go ahead and make. That's just what it comes down to. You cannot complain about the lack of progress that you've made if you haven't made the progress within your actions. You can learn things, but if you don't apply what you learn, then life will teach you the lesson again as if you haven't learned it before. That's just what it comes down to, man. It sucks. No, trust me, it sucks. Trust me, it sucks for sure. And like I said, I'm speaking from my own personal experiences, and not only my personal experiences, but also the experiences that I've observed within others. I do believe that there's going to be certain things like this that will set apart average people from people that are above average. There's certain things like this, certain understandings of life, certain knowledge that people have acquired and applied that the average person has not applied. That is going to be the difference within the end result of both of their lives. That is the way that I personally see it. And like I had mentioned before, right? Me being a person who's been a wisdom-seeking person for the last 5 years, ever since I was ending high school around 17, right? Me knowing these certain things, me being a very, very good observer of other people around me, avoiding the problems that I know I need to go ahead and avoid. It's very tricky because I could easily say the excuse of I'm young. I'm young. I have a lot of time. I can repeat these same types of things that I've already learned. But I'm young and I have a lot of time, right? Which is going to be the excuse for most people. Most people around my age, they will refuse to take action or make progress in the things that they know they probably should make progress within because they have a lot of time. Now, is that a good enough reason to not apply the knowledge that you've learned? I would say no. But like I said, it's an interesting thing because most people don't ever want to face their demons. They just don't. They can't handle it. It's too much stress. It causes anxiety. It's going to cause depression. It's going to be too much. So, you know what? You might as well not even deal with it at all. Just, act like it's not there. That's most people's courses of action when it comes to making progress within their life. I could make the decision, it's been in my mind, but, I'm just going to put it off, man. I'm just going to put it off. Because right now, it's a little bit easier to deal with if I'm just not thinking about it, right? It's just easier to deal with because I don't have to deal with it right now. I don't have to deal with the consequences of that situation right now. So I might as well just put it off and it'll just go away, right? No, that's not how life works. Ideally, that's how life works. Real life does not work that way, and it will never work that way ever. So like I said, are you going to be one of those people who are unwilling to face the demons that will inevitably come up within your life? Or are you going to be a person who puts it away just like everybody else? It's interesting to see people. It's very, very interesting to see people who try to live their life in an ignorant state when life is telling them, hey, you shouldn't do that shit. You know better than this. People are telling you, life is suggesting there's going to be opportunities that will come up that you'll need to evaluate that sacrifice or not. But life is pushing you and saying, hey, you need to make the sacrifice, but you are the person that is unwilling to make that sacrifice. Like I said, what I will say though is most people hearing this podcast is going to be super, super uncomfortable. They just don't want to hear it at all because it's too much self reflection. Now, if you're a person that has listened to this thoroughly, whether you're watching this or watching this live, I'm going to give you the props because most people cannot. That's just what it comes down to. It's too uncomfortable to hear these things. And like I had mentioned on my last podcast, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. If you want to go here, if you want somebody to tell you what you want to hear, never listen to me. I'm always going to be here to tell you exactly what you need to hear. That's just what it is. Now, you take the utility, take whatever you can from this podcast, apply it to your life, or like I said, be a person. You can either take what I have to say and apply it to your life, or you're just gonna be like everybody else, where these things will come up. You put them in the back burner. You'll try to hide them in the cache files, but they'll inevitably come up because you still haven't made the progress that you know you need to make. Right? There's only two ideals, realistically. Like they're not even ideals. There's only one ideal. There's two situations. There's two options you can go ahead and take. Now, with you knowing all of this, you're all knowing now. Like I had mentioned, you're the opposite of the saying of the podcast, right? Ignorance is bliss. You have the painful knowledge now. The knowledge that is very, very painful to acquire, but nonetheless painfully necessary to go ahead and acquire. Now, what you do with this is up to you because now I know you watching this right now have this knowledge. What will you do with that? Will you be a good parent to yourself or not? Will you be an average person or not? Will you make average person decisions or not? Go ahead and ask that for yourself, man. Go ahead and answer that for yourself, rather. There's always something to learn when watching Life of a Champ. Appreciate it, appreciate it. That's like having a bad wound, but refusing to go to the hospital because the adrenaline is taking away the pain and choosing to wait until it becomes painful. Waiting can cause even more damage. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. That's just what it comes down to. That's just what it comes down to. But like I said, I see this very, very clear with older people. Like I said, younger people, you need to evaluate for what it is, right? This podcast is made for younger people. But at the end of the day, I find it interesting how I see it more commonly with people who don't have the I'm young excuse. They choose to live within ignorance at an old age because they're unwilling to change, even if they know what they're doing is wrong. Why is that? Like I said, then you got to break down why are people doing this? Ultimately, it's going to come down to is they've stopped being able to self-govern themselves when it's necessary still. You don't ever get to a point in life where you're just like, I'm going to run this shit on autopilot. Like you don't ever live that life where you're like, yeah, I'm just going to turn the autopilot on, cruising. That's just not how it works, man. That's just not how it works because life is inevitably going to throw these challenges at you. Right? It's inevitably going to throw these your way, right? And if it's not the one that you're dealing with right now, let's just say you get over it, it's going to be another one. Or who knows? Maybe you'll still have the one that you have right now, but guess what? Life's going to throw more onto your plate because you didn't choose to eat what you had on the plate, so we're going to go ahead and feed you more food, right? Think about that, man. Think about that. But yeah, are you a person that would rather deal with the consequences right now or later? Think about that. There's consequences of the action right now that you can go ahead and take action forthwith with given your knowledge that you've learned, or are you going to take the consequences that you'll know will happen again, that you have the knowledge to go ahead and stop, but you choose to not stop it because it's easier to do that. It's easier. It's way easier to just act like the shit doesn't exist. Like I said, to put it on the back burner, to leave it in the cache files. It's so much easier to act like these things don't exist. It's so much easier to void yourself from facing the darkest demons that you will have. But just because it's the easiest decision to make doesn't mean it's the right decision that needs to be made. Because, like I said, at the end of the day, you're going to have internal conflict. Now, what type of internal conflict are you going to choose for yourself? Answer that yourself. Like I said, hopefully I help somebody out. But ultimately, that's pretty much what I have to say. To wrap it up, one of the most important things that I'll reiterate on this podcast, especially to this specific topic, is you need to feel guilt. Guilt is one of the most healthiest feelings you can ever feel because you know you're on the right path if you're feeling guilt. Even if your decision doesn't suggest that you're on the right path, you're on the right path because you have this ultimate guiding compass within yourself of the things that you know which is right and what is wrong and what move to make and what move to not make at all. Right? I would say if you're raised correctly, which hopefully most people have been raised correctly, which is probably unfortunately not true, but let's just say most people have been raised correctly. They understand what's right and what's wrong. Now, I want you to act as if you know what's right and what's wrong. And if you choose what's wrong, feel guilty, feel it fully. Because if you don't, then your actions will never change. And like I mentioned, right, the death of guilt will be the death of your progress. Feel guilty. If you're not making the right move, that is fine. You need to feel guilty for that. If you don't feel guilty for that, you're fucked. That's what it comes down to. Regardless, like I said, regardless, knowing and not knowing, it's painful regardless. What pain do you want to go ahead and choose? What life path do you want to go ahead and take? What demons do you need to go ahead and face? Figure these all out yourself and then you'll be good. That is what I have to say for today's episode. This was episode 163 of the Life of a Champ podcast, talking about ignorance is bliss. A few things I want to say before I go and end it off. Make sure you go and follow me on all socials: TikTok, Twitch, Rumble, all Life of a Champ podcast. Also follow me on Instagram, Life of a Champ podcast. Tap in with that for sure. And other than that, do I have anything else I want to leave you guys with? Today's Tuesday. I'll be having another podcast on Thursday. Make sure to tap in with that for sure. Anything else I want to say? Fellas out here, man, we don't just work around here, man. We outwork. So make sure you outwork these motherfuckers because you know that I am. Like I said, if you're gonna make a decision that is the wrong decision, feel guilty. You need to feel guilt, and hopefully that'll be one of the things that you could take from this podcast. You feeling guilty. Y'all have a good night. Tap in with the podcast on Thursday. Like I said, I work these motherfuckers, and you should be good to go, man. Have a good night.